Hello, good morning. It is Tuesday, February 18th, and I am Rob, also known as thatDeveloperDad, and I am working on an app to help me at my D&D table. I'll just pop a little description of the project in here, and I'll add a link to the home page it's the landing page for the product. And just to recap what I've been doing the past week or so, I went to private beta about a week and a half-ish ago, and then I started working on some features that are going to allow the users to manage the NPCs that they've created. I set up a delete capability, a filter capability, and then I wanted to pivot into expanding on the sets of attributes that are randomly generated when you just randomly roll up an NPC before you pass off to the language model. And I started off just to refamiliarize myself with the way the townsfolk class and all the different templates work. I did I expanded upon how personality traits are selected randomly. And then I got into building out ability scores. And I worked quite a long time yesterday in between and after the streams to get that up and running. I've got unit tests working now. And I've got I've got one test that has, I think it's 13,000 cases on it, or over 13,000 cases, and that represents one of each possible combination of species, background, and vocation. I'll flip over to my screen here, and we'll take a look at the actual test class. And you can see here how what I did was I just used nested loops for each species, go through each background, and for each background, go through each vocation and build up a set of parameters that I can then pass into my test StatBuilder generate scores. And then, of course, within that generate scores, I pull out the 6 ability scores and I validate what got generated for that score. And I just make sure that the stat isn't null. It's greater than 0. It is less than 30, and I should say less than 30, or greater than or equal to. If the stat is greater than or equal to 30, we want to kick it out. The modifier was never calculated, or the modifier was calculated incorrectly. So just before I dive in, let's go ahead and run this. And it'll take a second, but not too many seconds, hopefully. It's got to build right now. And then it'll run. It takes about 10 seconds to run all of these different use cases. Hey, Mars, what's up, man? So, yeah, I've got lots and lots and lots of different possible combinations. All right. So we've got our stat builder. It does all this stuff. And now I need to add calculators for hit points, armor class, initiative modifier, proficiency bonus, stuff like that. Now, proficiency bonus, I think, is going to be just a straight assignment for most of these things. But, excuse me. Let's take a look at the existing calculators. So the NPC ability score calculator That is basically a dice roll, or it's a dice roll modified by attributes, species, background, vocation. And then the ability score modifier is just, it's a straight up calculation based off of a single value. So that's one kind of calculator. Another kind of calculator is just randomized but adjusted. And where's my reference to this? I should probably pull these out because I don't want to use these anymore. Let's go to the StatBuilder. And set modifier, assign calculator to group, configure. What I need to do, instead of that, is take a look at these. And I should probably, before I do that, let's do refactor. And I want to introduce a constant. And for all occurrences of species. And I need to rename that symbol input species. There we go. And let's do the same for these others. Introduce constant. Rename input background. Copy that. Paste it here. Refactor. Introduce constant for all occurrences. Rename that to input vocation. Rename to input DiceBag. And finally, refactor all occurrences. Rename input underscore base value. There we go. Now, where do those get put? They're up here. Let's make it public. Rather than type it over and over again. And those are the keys that we're going to use from outside. Ability calc dot add input base value 10 dot, there we go. Now we can get rid of that. And I believe these add inputs are returning my iAttribute calculator. So what I could do is I can use this as a Fluent API. There's no target type for new. Fine. NPC ability score calculator. Now, what's all this complaining about? All right. Let's just say fix using Copilot. See what it does. Excuse me. Do, 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 do. Oh, okay. There we go. And we'll accept that. And this is a safe conversion. I don't often like doing these types of conversions here because it's not necessarily guaranteed, but because I know that I'm calling these methods on an instance of NPC AbilityScore calculator, I know I'm fine. Another way I suppose I could have done it would be possibly, I'll just cut that to my clipboard, as NPC AbilityScore calculator. And this might return null, but it's not likely. I know it's not going to. But I don't like that big ugly blob of yellow. So we'll just do this. Save that. Now, because this is a relatively decently sized refactor, I'm going to go ahead and rerun this test. Or it's not a decently sized refactor, but it's definitely something that could possibly break. So I want to make sure it didn't break before I carry on doing what I'm doing. And it's taking a little bit of time to run, but that's okay. I would rather take 30 seconds and test this over 12,000 times to make sure that it's actually going to work for me. And it does. So we have calculators that are based on a random roll adjusted for other attribute values or other attribute templates. We have another calculator that's based on just a straight function against a single value. And I think for HitPoints, I'm going to spin up a new kind of calculator. And I think what I'll do is I'm going to take a look at the rule set definitions in the abstractions. Default attribute adjustments. That's just something, a direct assignment calculator. All it does is returns this value. It doesn't actually do anything. Unimplemented exception. The direct assignment calculator does not require inputs, does not require a collection of inputs. Use the add input method instead. There. Save. Now, I think what I'll do here is in the abstractions, even though I don't like putting concretes in my abstractions namespace, I'm going to say roll with adjustments calculator. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to do these as concrete up here in the 5e rule set, in the 5e creation engine. So class, let's say adjusted random. No. HitPoints calculator. And it's going to implement I attribute calculator. We got to import the namespace, implement the interface, create a private dictionary, string object, inputs. We'll just instantiate that right now. String name, object value, calculate. We're going to need a private void read inputs. And up here, we need to read inputs. And in the constructor, I'll just get rid of this parameters thing. Goodbye. And inputs dot add default dice expression and I'm going to say 1d8. In fact, add input default dice expression 1d8. And if inputs contains key name, set the value. Otherwise, we just add it as a new dictionary entry. And we'll return this. Inputs.add. There. I'll just do it that way, manually. And calculate read inputs. All right. That was the pattern I was using. String default. Wait. Yeah, default expression is that. DiceBag equals that species template, not species template, just species template. And we'll bring in those namespaces. Now these are nullable. Var base result equals DiceBag.roll default expression, return base result. We're just going to keep it nice and simple for now. Base result dot result. There we go. Because roll returns a dice tray object that lets us take a look at the internals of the dice that we rolled. So we've got base result dot result. Okay. Now, if inputs dot count no, for each var entry in inputs add input entry key entry value. Yep, that works. And it just flips through them. And I believe we're mostly implemented. So I want to come, before I do anything, I'm going to come out to HitPoints calculator, or the my UnitTest class. And let's just get a little test around this, shall we? Fact public void test HitPoints calculator. System under test, DiceBag equals new DiceBag. We got to pull this in. We're good. Species, background vocation, test HitPoints calculator, default config. And I think for this guy, I'm going to come up here and I'm actually going to require the DiceBag on construction. There we go. Now, I also want to refactor, introduce constant, key 1, rename it to input default input roll dice expression. And refactor, introduce constant, all occurrences, rename input DiceBag. There we go. Yeah, default expression. So by default, it's going to do a 1d8. We'll roll back out here, and I'm just going to pass in that DiceBag instance in the constructor. And we are not going to add any of this stuff. I'm going to pop back out to the hit points calculator. And because I know DiceBag won't be null, we'll be okay. Save. StatBuilder tests. Assert true, result is greater than 0. Let's run this. No tests were found here. Oh, that's right, because I have to rebuild. Because the test runner on this thing is sometimes a goose. Oh, no problems here. Oh, that's right. I still have those problems. That's okay, though. All right, what was the silly dance I did yesterday? Clean? Rebuild? And then I think I can refresh. And then there was another step. I reloaded the window. Still trying to load the project. Come on. Try building that. Here we go. It found them. Let's try running this. This one should only take a second. Oh, it threw up. Calculates the value of the attribute based on the given input. Key not found. Hello, TJR is. What's up? I'm writing software to generate random non-player characters for my D&D game and other people's D&D games. Okay. So I need to change this so that I do use some AI occasionally. I consider it fairly frequent use, but let's see here. Inputs dot. I need a better way of doing this. Private object. Try get input string key. There we go. I'll just add that little check here. And try get input. Change the square brackets to parentheses. There we go. And I'm going to make the same change here. I really wish that would stop jumping up and down like that, jumping around on stage like a dipstick. Try get input background. Now, before I go further, because I do need to pass these in, or I will need to pass these input values in later, and I need to specify them by name. I'm going to go at not rename, refactor, constant, all occurrences. Rename that to input species. Do the same thing here. Rename to input background. All occurrences. Rename input vocation. In answer to your question, TJ, yes, I do use AI quite a bit, in fact. But things where I'm figuring out how I want to do something, and I've already got a vague idea, I prefer to work the code like by hand rather than just trusting in the AI. When I do use AI, it's either for things that I can describe that I know definitely what I want to have happen, and I've got a vague idea of the actual technical thing. For instance, if I have to do some heavy-duty JavaScript or browser programming, I'll lean on my Copilot a lot more than I do in, say, regular C#. Another place where I'll use AI quite a lot is when I'm trying to perform, where I'm doing data setup, or I need to do something that is easily described but has to be done over and over and over again and would be incredibly time consuming. That's typically where I'll use AI, is to help me with that, as well as just kind of talking through architectural concepts. If I have like an idea that I want to chase out, I'll frequently have long conversations with a language model. And I know it's not really telling me anything new. It's sort of being a digital yes person. But, oh, good, that worked. My test passed. So this guy works. I actually want to drop a breakpoint here, debug, and I want to see what it rolled. Results is greater than 0. 1 hit point. That poor bugger. Let's run it again. Six hit points. That's better. Okay. Save. There's another input that I want to add, and it is going to be public const string input min value. Is that? And I'm actually going to set that min value. Inputs.add. It's not going to be 1. I'm going to set the minimum value for this to 3. Save. I'm going to come back here, greater than or equal to 3. Save. Back in here. Base result dot result. Int min value if base result is less than min value, base result is min value. Dot result. There we go. Save. And run the test again. Now there's a feature in full Visual Studio that I really like for this kind of thing, and it's live unit testing. So what it does is it kind of promotes test first development, where as you create your tests first, and then as you work on the implementation of the classes that will be satisfying the requirements of the tests, it actually reevaluates those unit tests in the background constantly. And then you get to watch your methods turn from red to green and so on. It's quite nice. Okay, so we can now roll hit points. We've got a range between 3 and 8 coming out. Let's go into the StatBuilder. And before we go into StatBuilder, we got to come into character attributes. Oops, wrong button. Here we go. And game attribute definition. Now I got to come into my 5e rule set. And I'm going to create a new file. It's going to be a class. And hit points attribute. It is going to game attribute base definition. It's going to inherit from that. And we have to implement the abstract class, calculate attribute value, return calculator dot calculate. Save. Generate a constructor. I can get rid of most of this stuff. So what I'm going to do while I do this is you're just going to push the parameter list so that each parameter gets its own line. And then the base constructor, base, and this is the name of the attribute that gets, yep, hit points. Calculator, we'll deal with that in a second. Calculator. Default value, 8 minus 3 is 5. Oh, I want the midpoint between 2, so 5. Default value is 5. Min value, say 1. Max value, I'm going to say 500. Save. Let's get rid of these. And I'll get rid of this. And then calculator, we're just going to say new default. What's it called? It's in the abstractions, direct assignment. And the value is going to be 5. It'll just assign the default value. And we can get rid of that required parameter on the hit points attribute. So we're good there. And that's really about all we should have to do, except dismiss all. I said dismiss all. And get out of here, Copilot. Public void calculator input. There we go. Yep. All right. Save that. Save this, hit points attribute. We've got that defined, and I got to come down to character attributes, because character attributes is the 5e rule set version of, or 5e rule set collection of character attributes. And hit points equals new hit points attribute. Save. Create AbilityScore group. Create AbilityScore definition. And I can pull this out. Save. Pardon me. Golly. Okay, set up calculators for hit points. Hit points calculator. HP calc equals new with our DiceBag. I believe it's defined up here somewhere. Yep. And HP calc generator.hitpoints, set calculator, groovy. And HP calc dot add input. And hit points calculator dot input species, background, vocation. All right, groovy. Set calculator. I think that's really about all we got to do. And then, of course, to stat collection, go to definition. Go to definition. Okay, so I've got a collection of attribute groups. Right. And my stat collection, I want to just review this. Ungroup stats and group stats. Add stat. Go to definition. New stat dot category equals the attribute group name. What properties have I got on here? Group name. There we go. Add stat. And then var HP stat equals HitPoints.toStatData and stats.addStat HitPointsStat. And we return generate NPC stats. Okay. That's my builder. Character attributes, game attribute definition will close. And let's come out here. And let's come out to generate scores. Var hit points equals that. Now, let's come out to hit point definition and game stats constants dot hit points dot, that's it. All right. Go to definition. And I'm going to make these one word. Save. Hit points attribute. All right. Back out to tests. And I'm just going to run one of these. Just going to debug one of the many, many, many thousand. Hit points. Base value 3, current value 3. Hit points. I think I screwed something up in the game stats constants. Go. All right. I want to debug a different one. Okay. And let's take a look at the hit points on this guy. He's got 8. Groovy. And I got to fix that hit points. Oh, yeah. Save. There. That's better. And finally, Let's just come down here. If HP equals null, errors.add, hit points is null. Hit points base value is 0 or less. Yeah, that works. Save. And just to test, to make sure everything is coming out right, let's just run this unit test many times. This will take about 30 seconds or so. All right. Now, there is another thing that we need to inject into this hit points calculator. Hey, Eddie. Up here in the hit points calculator, I also need, let's get rid of that. Doing okay. Pub const string input constitution. And AbilityScore constitution equals that. Roll the dice. Add the constitution modifier. And base result plus equals constitution dot derived attributes modifier dot oh, I'm using the wrong object. Stat data. Try to get input. There we go. And it's substat modifier dot base value. And just for readability purposes, I'm going to wrap that expression. No, you know what? Int conmod equals, let's just go ahead and be we'll do that. Plus equals conmod. There. Save. And that needs a semicolon. Some days you do feel like a nut. and some days you don't. And on the days where I feel like a nut, I try to stay away from squirrels. All right, character attributes. I don't really need those. Game stat constants, don't need those. I do need the stat builder. Where are you? I think my stat builder, well, I can just get there from here. Go to definition, go to definition. Here we are. Create attribute generator, stats equals generator.toStat collection. Not, well, yeah, go to definition. Now, those are those. Now, var constat equals stats dot get stat, game stat constants, constitution, good, hit points dot come down to hit points down here, and instead of a game attribute definition, I'm going to say hit point attribute dot add calculator input, hit points calculator. I don't have that. All right, because the hit points calculator is in a parallel namespace. Go to definition. Instead of constitution score, I'm just going to pass the word constitution because I can use that. There. I'll just use the same constant reference over here. No, constat will absolutely be not null here. There, that's better. Okay. And let's run one of these tests. I don't want to run all 12,000 of them. I'm going to come out here, and I have got a breakpoint here in the test method. So I want to debug one of these choices. Here we are. Hit points. We've got 3. A 3 hit point Minotaur. Wow, it's weak. Let's debug that again. Now he's got 5. Okay, that's better. These are commoners, but that actually reveals something that feels a little funny to me. And you would expect these that are, of some of the larger mythical species like minotaurs or ogres to be a little bit tougher than your average. So I'm thinking we're going to need to set up species, background, and perhaps even vocation overrides on hit point rules. And those rules are going to be a lot simpler than the ones that we set up for attribute for ability score adjustments. So I think we're going to want to consider varying which kind of dice and how many to use for different species, and come up with some ways to adjust the hit point output for these various species. And we're going to start working on that when I come back this afternoon. So until then, I appreciate you dropping by, and take care of yourselves. Happy coding. Bye now.